Hello, thank you for joining us today. I'm Laura Kunkel, America in Bloom Executive Director. America in Bloom has been around for more than 2 decades. We envision communities across the country as welcoming and vibrant places to live, work, and play, benefiting from colorful plants and trees, enjoying clean environments, celebrating heritage, and planting pride through volunteerism. Through our programs, grant opportunities, online resources, and the sharing of best ideas from towns and cities across the country, we empower communities to beautify and improve the overall quality of life. Today's webinar is an example of one of the ways that America in Bloom shares information to help communities become more beautiful, vibrant, and sustainable. You can learn more about AIB by visiting our website at americainbloom.org. All right, a quick housekeeping note. If you have questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section of your Zoom toolbar. Depending on the flow of the webinar, we'll try to throw questions to Kaitlyn as they arise, but we may end up holding those questions until the end. We have some flexibility on this. For today's webinar, we are honored to have Kaitlyn Sterner with us to teach us how to keep our plants looking great during the summer months. With her rooted background in the public garden space beginning at Longwood Gardens, Kaitlyn Sterner brings expertise and passion to everything she does. She is a plant nerd with growing experience ranging from chrysanthemums to coleus to cannabis to chickens. Yes, chickens. More recently, her focus shifted into the plant science and nutrition space, where she is now the Director of Technical Support at Jack's Fertilizers. Through lab analysis and interpretation, Kaitlyn continually works with other horticulturalists, helping them crush their growing goals through nutrient choices based on science-driven data. She's a nurturer who likes to see plants and critters thrive. We are grateful to have Kaitlyn to be with us today. Take it away, Kaitlyn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really glad to be here with this group. Definitely what America in Bloom is doing across the country is super important to us here at Jack's Fertilizers as well. So let's get started. What I'm going to do today is talk to you about feeding your plants and keeping those containers and displays looking good all summer long. So let me get my laser pointer, and here we go. So just a little bit about the company that I work for in the horticulture industry. I work for Jack's Fertilizers. We are made in the USA, water-soluble plant food, owned by a family. On this picture here, this is Jack Peters, who is the owner, and his daughter Carrie, who is also an owner and our lead formulator right now. And the Peters family has been making fertilizer since 1947. We pride ourselves in a high quality plant product at a low cost. So once it's mixed with water and applied to plants, you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 cents per gallon. It's an efficient and effective plant food. So these powdered formulas that we blend are crafted with technical grade ingredients. So we're making sure everything is pure and true to the elements that are in it, and soluble. Solubility is key. We need to make sure that solution goes into a full solution when mixed. Also, what allows us to stand out in the industry, not just as a fertilizer company, but really as an active member in the green industry, is our on-site laboratory. So not only are we blending fertilizer, but we also have a lab that tests that fertilizer as well as plant tissue and soilless media to really help give that extra punch to growers all over the country. And myself here as the Director of Tech Support works with our lab and growers to kind of take those growing goals like to the next level, to really bring it full circle and not just, you know, trying to sell fertilizer. Like, that's not our bottom line. We really want to work with growers in the industry to make sure the plants that are going out to the market are the highest quality as expected. So this is an overview of our products. We have 3 main product lines of fertilizer. Our Jack's Classic is our retail line for home gardeners, sold in smaller tubs for a smaller use and a finer blend. Our Jack's Professional bags are the commercial 25-pound bags of feed blended specifically for greenhouse and ornamental growers. And then our Jack's Nutrients line was launched in 2017. And again, this is a 25-pound bag and 1 kg product, both for the commercial and retail space in the controlled environment area. So that's just an overview of our products. And all of them are the same. So everything that you'd be getting in a small container as a home gardener, it's the same quality of raw materials that's going into our commercial bag. So really, it's a high quality blend specifically for the home gardener. So why feed? There are really not enough naturally occurring nutrients in well or municipal or rainwater. And that's where water-soluble fertilizer comes into play to provide that full nutrient solution to support healthy plant growth, robust flowers, and long-term vigor for display plants that you're putting out in the spring or early summer and want to last well through those hot months, even in and through the fall. So working here at Jack's Fertilizers, it does give me a little bit of an internal struggle sometimes, because a lot of times I'll be putting my containers out in spring. And if I'm feeding them properly, sometimes last summer I had pansies that were like thriving in July. And I just, as a horticulturalist, like I didn't want to pull them because they look so good, but the seasonality of it was time for them to go, but they look so great. And really, you can see in these pictures here, just when plants are properly fed, they really, really perform well. This container here is a nice mix that the customer was feeding throughout the summer. The grass is thriving. The spilling plants are just hitting the ground practically. This middle picture is a really nice fall display of different annuals that were being fed as well. And what's really impressive is this geranium on the right. I mean, this plant is huge. This is almost 4 feet around. I think there are 3 plants in this pot, if I remember correctly. But these photos, I just kind of want you to see the importance of what feeding your plants regularly can benefit. So with that being said, choosing the right plant food can be a little overwhelming. This is Whitney, our social media manager at a local garden center here. She just grabbed all the jacks on the counter, and I just love this picture so much. But not only within our own products, but in general in the market, there are a lot of options of plant food. And what I'm going to do today, my goal is to kind of walk you through the basic concepts of fertilizer, so you kind of have the tools that you need to help make the right decisions for how you're growing, what your displays are looking like, and getting a plan together that is easy to implement. So the first step in any plant growing situation, whether you're in a greenhouse, whether you're growing in a park, whether you're growing in city streets or municipality corners, in those kind of town displays, it's really important that you understand the water that's being used to water those plants. A lot of my experience is growing up in the traditional greenhouse space. And we would always say the person who's watering your plants is the person who's holding your pocketbook at the end of the day. It's really important that the person who's applying that solution is doing a good job, but you also want to know what the quality of water that's there, so you can match a fertilizer that makes sense. So we always start with a water test to make that choice for the plants that are being grown. And what we test here, so this is part of our laboratory service that we have, is that we can test for all levels of growing, from home gardeners to schools, to commercial greenhouses, any kind of park or recreational organization. If you're using a water source, whether it's a private well or a municipal source, it's really important to understand the quality of the nutrients that are in your water. And with that being said, I'm sure a lot of you are probably using a municipal water source. And one of the situations that I come across a lot is I'll ask for a water, if someone reaches out, I'll ask for a water report, and they'll send me a report from the town or city that's supplying their water. And although there's a lot of good information in that report, when it comes to plant nutrition, it doesn't really encompass everything. What I really need to look at are the free nutrients, so your macronutrients, your micronutrients, to see what's available there. And a lot of times those municipal reports don't encompass all of that data. It's more of bacteria levels and chloride and sodium levels, which are also important. But I need a more full picture from a macro and micronutrient standpoint. So just something to keep in mind. Most municipal water is obviously fine to grow plants with. It's just understanding what free nutrients are there to make that decision. So container, so reading the label of a fertilizer bag, I kind of want to walk you all through this because at the end of the day, there's a lot of valuable information in the label itself. So we'll just kind of start here in the upper left with the guaranteed analysis. As you can see, it's located here on the label. And really what this is, you know, it's the roadmap to understanding the product that you have in your hand and the nutrients that are being delivered in that blend. So what we claim in the guaranteed analysis is pretty much we're guaranteeing the percent or the amount of each nutrient in that blend. So you can see on the left here, it's listed, we list our macronutrients first, we list our secondaries, and then your micronutrients at the bottom. And this just gives you a breakdown. And you don't need to be a chemist to understand all of this. I just want to make sure you know where to look in the product label. Then underneath the guaranteed analysis, we have the derived from statement. And this is kind of the ingredients list for the fertilizer. This is where we list all of our raw materials that are used to go into the blend. And it's really important to know what's in there because there are some things that you don't really want in fertilizer. For example, some elements are only available attached to sodium ions, and you don't really want to be putting sodium into your plant food only because it kind of inhibits plant growth if there's too much of it. So here at Jack's, obviously this is one of our labels that I'm walking you through, but we're really particular about the raw materials that we're using, and you're not going to find any of that sodium or chloride tagged raw material. We're trying to use the purest forms in our plants because we don't want anything extra that the plant really isn't going to benefit from in that. Underneath the derived from statement is the calcium carbonate equivalent. This is going to show or state the potential acidity or the potential basicity of the fertilizer in a calcium carbonate equivalent by pound per ton. So pretty much what that means is if it's a potentially acidic blend, that means it's most likely going to lower your pH over time versus a basic blend of fertilizer. A lot of times there's going to be calcium in with that blend. Calcium is a basic element, which will most likely cause the pH to rise over time. So just a fun thing to be aware of. Again, that's where your understanding your water quality comes into play and choosing that right product. And then here to the upper right, we're going to go over, you know, the formula, name, and grade. This pretty much is just giving you the NPK value. So in this case, it's our 2319 petunia feed, very common product I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with or are using in your displays. And it states obviously that it's a water-soluble fertilizer for a continuous liquid feed program. So there's different ways you can apply. There's mixing instructions on the label right here in this box that will kind of walk you through. But for the most part, what we try to target is a continuous liquid feed for all plants. And what this means is you're going to be mixing a low rate of fertilizer in with your water and applying that with every application. So it's just this continual low rate of fertilizer that's fed all the time. And I like to think of it this way. As humans, we eat 3 meals a day, like a small amount of food a couple times a day. It's the same with plants. Just applying clear water or plain water time and time again, you're going to be depleting the nutrients in that root zone with every application, compared to using a continuous liquid feed program where you're applying that low rate of feed all the time, and your plant shouldn't be going hungry because every element is being provided with each application. And then something that we pride ourselves in as being our own manufacturer of our own products, we do list our name and address on the label. This is for registration purposes, but when you look at other fertilizers on the market, not all fertilizer companies are making their own blends. And this is what allows us here at Jack's to kind of stand out from the rest of the competition. Only because I'm here in our headquarters right now, and if I walk outside my office, I can walk right into our manufacturing floor, and the guys are out there and girls are out there blending for us. We do it all in-house here, which just allows our quality control to take, you know, that next step and really guarantee what's in our products. So, like I said, most questions that come up about fertilizer, there's usually a lot of the answers can be found on the fertilizer label. So it's really important to take a second and just look it over and make yourself familiar with it. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I know I mentioned earlier about the technical and greenhouse grade of our product. And what this means is compared to like traditional ag fertilizer, which we get a lot of questions about being fertilizer. People don't know, like there's ag grade fertilizer that goes out on a farm field versus a technical grade, greenhouse grade fertilizer, which is a higher quality, more pure and soluble feed. A lot of times it comes down to competitive pricing and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, a technical grade fertilizer is one that will go into a complete solution. It's a higher quality raw material that we're using, designed to be mixed with water and fed through an irrigation or drip system. So, and a lot of times with these technical grades, the lower grade materials can have unwanted impurities, kind of like I talked about before. Might have extra sodium or chloride, which are not really beneficial to plant growth, but there can also be clay, silt, and heavy metals especially. We test heavy metals a lot because not only are our products made for, you know, greenhouse growing, but also edible crops as well. So, and we don't want anything to clog injectors or, you know, mess up irrigation systems. So, this is a fun chart. So this is just the 17 essential plant nutrients that are super important for, again, that long-term, robust, healthy growth that you're looking to get in baskets and containers that are out for display for a long part of the season. So you have your macronutrients listed first, along with your secondary macros, which are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, and then the micronutrients as well. So I'm not going to talk too much about each one. That could take like a half hour on each element if I really wanted to dive into it. But this is just a nice chart that really shows the function in the plant tissue and why each element is important. So the overall goal is plant growth. So a lot of these elements contribute to chlorophyll production, protein production, photosynthesis, like calcium metabolism, and different things like that, because all of that goes into what is going to produce that nice plant that you're targeting. So along with that, with all of these nutrients and elements being very important to provide in that complete solution that you're putting onto your plants, you can mix up fertilizer and put it on your plants, and it might not perform like you expect it to, and that's where pH comes into play. So this bottom section here is highlighted in the chart on the right. You can see all the elements listed on the pH scale. And you can see that when your pH gets low and you're working like that 4 to 5 range, your macronutrients become less available for the plant to take up. However, your micronutrients are really available, which is good. But what we're aiming for is a very uniform space where everything can be available for plant uptake. And that's where this 6 pH is really key in your fertilizer solution. So if you're not testing your pH or you have been feeding and you're not super thrilled with how your plants have been performing, definitely checking the pH of that solution would be a very easy in-house thing that you can do before taking a sample and sending it off to a lab. So a lot of times just getting, you know, I call it a fertilizer toolbox that most growers have or should have. And it's having the tools that you need to do some in-house testing to help you figure out what's going on with your plants before you're sending off samples for lab analysis and spending dollars on those kind of services. So some tools you'd want to keep in your back pocket would be distilled water, which is nice for pour throughs through that root zone to see what's going on, and then an EC or a pH pen. And those is just a handheld meter, super easy to use. We like recommending Blue Lab meters a lot of times, or we have a Hannah meter here as well that we use. And it's a simple calibration with an acid and a base. And then you take that meter and you just stick it into the solution of the plants that you're feeding that runs through those pots, just to see where your pH is, or Once you mix up your fertilizer solution, you would just stick that pen right in that finished solution and see where your pH is and make adjustments. If it's too high and you need to bring it down, that's where incorporating an acid like sulfuric acid would come into play to help lower it. Or if you have a really low pH and you need to raise it, that's where you could use a basic product like a potassium bicarbonate. But again, the goal we're trying to achieve here is this middle bracket right around 6, anywhere from 5.8 to a 6.2 pH is what's going to allow all the nutrients in that fertilizer solution to be available to those plants. So that's a little bit about the science and the water quality part. Now let's talk about how these nutrients specifically affect growth. So this is a nice little snapshot of the 3 more popular blends that we have here that really makes sense for the space of growing that this audience is doing here. So an all-purpose, a petunia feed, and a blossom booster. And let's talk about some certain elements in these blends that really make sense and why they're important and why we include them. So I want to talk about phosphorus. So that's going to be the middle number of your NPK ratio on fertilizer. What phosphorus does for plants is it supports flowering and fruit formation and a robust root system. With that being said, too much phosphorus can cause plants to stretch and really making that inner node length longer and causing the stems to be a little more weaker. So a lot of fertilizer that I like to use and recommend for more of that compact growth involves a lower phosphorus. So an example would be a 20-10-20 peat light or our 23-19 petunia feed. And these photos here I want to talk about because this really dives into the importance of phosphorus. So this was a grower. These were pictures from a grower that I worked with in spring of 2023. And they had petunia baskets that were not looking great. So this photo on the left here, as you can see, the basket here in the middle, all this growth is very green in the middle. And the plants really stretched out and then flowered below. And anybody who's growing baskets or carrying out finished baskets, like that's not really the shape or the form we're looking for with petunias. And when I talked to him, the grower was feeding them Blossom Booster, which is a 10-30-20. So that's 30% phosphorus that was going on these plants. And as you can see, when I talk about phosphorus and how it cannot be great for stretch, that's exactly what was happening to these plants. All that phosphorus was causing them to really stretch out and lose that compact center growth. But the blooms were really busting on the ends of those stems. And it's just not what you're looking for with this kind of crop. So what we did was we adjusted his feed. So we got him back onto a petunia feed at 23-19, and we actually trimmed the baskets back. So I worked with him, talked with him, and kind of guided him, and he had plenty of time to like trim them back and still hit a market he was trying to target in the couple weeks time that he had. And this was the photo. This photo on the right here is what he sent me around 3.5 weeks after he trimmed them back and started feeding a lower phosphorus formula. And you can see they flushed out really beautifully. This is the basket, and I can attest this is the same basket he took pictures of. But this is what it looked like afterwards, and it's just more of that compact growth with enough phosphorus in that blend because the plant doesn't need a whole lot. I think 10% phosphorus in a formula is a sufficient amount to still promote that flower production. And as you can see here, the plant really responded nicely to it. Another element is calcium that I want to talk about because it's really an important secondary macro that contributes to the strength of the cell wall, which ultimately is going to support a strong plant, especially for finished plants that are being grown in the outdoor space throughout the season. You want to make sure that you're providing enough calcium so that the plant is not floppy and falling over when, you know, those summer storms come through or traffic or any kind of airflow. You want to make sure the plant can withstand those external elements. So a lot of times calcium can be found in source water. This is where the water analysis comes into play. And a lot of times when I look at that data, I'm really trying to see what free nutrients are there that we can work with and not have to incorporate with the fertilizer. And calcium is one of those elements that is found in a lot of water. A lot of municipal water sources, hard water is where you're going to get a lot of calcium. Ideally, around 50 to 100 parts per million calcium is sufficient for growing plants. And well water sources have calcium too, certain wells. Where you're not going to get calcium is in pure water sources. So if you're using rainwater or any other kind of pure water source, that is not going to contain calcium in it. And then that's where we'd have to go down the path of finding a feed that makes sense and has calcium in it to supplement it. So yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about calcium. These were nice tall fall containers that I snapped some pictures of. But it's just really important to make sure that calcium is available. So some blends that would have calcium would be like a 17-4-17 pure water, designed specifically for pure water sources. And we also have like a 15-5-15 CalMag. But that's part of what a service that we have here at Jax is. If you're confused or not sure, like just reach out to us and we'll be the ones to help you with choosing a fertilizer that makes the most sense for what you're growing and how you're growing it. And then let's chat about micronutrients a little bit, because a micronutrient package is what really brings a fertilizer full circle. And when I look at other brands of plant food that are on the market, a lot of them focus on macronutrients solely, which is sufficient in producing a green plant or a really big blooming plant. But without micronutrients, they just take that growth to the next level. You're going to get more toned growth, you're going to get more compact growth and just a healthier green leaf than just a plant that's really just growing straight up towards the light. So the feed package in our products is really important. This petunia feed, we do a play on iron here with the Fe. What this is it's a boosted iron combination. So we use 3 sources of iron, which are highlighted here, DTPA, EDBHA, and EDTA. These are iron chelates, and they all work differently, which allow the iron to be more available throughout a broader pH range. So that's really helpful. And the iron inefficient plants that benefit from this the most are petunia, calibrachoa, verbena, lantana, plants that take up nutrients, but if your pH isn't at the right spot, they're not going to use that micronutrient specifically. And that's when you're going to start to see yellowing growth and just not healthy plants. I have some slides coming up that really show what I'm talking about here, but making sure that pH is where it needs to be is, again, super important, like we saw on that previous slide, especially for micronutrients that the plants can use. And what's really fun about iron is that it can cause the powder of fertilizer to change in color, both the powder and when mixed in solution. And it's nothing to be alarmed by. I get that question a lot. It's really just the different irons that are reds and browns in color, and depending on the source that we're getting them from, it can cause fertilizer to look green or purple or red and blue too. But iron containing feeds sometimes really get unique colors you're not quite expecting when you mix it up. So let's talk a little bit now about fertilizers that work together. So water soluble feed is what we've mostly been talking about. That's the powder you're going to mix with water. But I also want to, shine some light on time release because that's really important too. And especially for plants that are being grown outdoors, you can apply it one time. If it rains, your plants are still going to get fed, and those nutrients are released over a longer period of time compared to a water soluble. So like I said, there's 2 ways that you can apply a water soluble feed, either as a continuous liquid feed, which is a lower rate all the time, or you can apply a weekly application which is a stronger solution, but it would only need to be applied like once every 7 days. Because it's a really strong shot of nutrients. And the nutrients are available right away with the water-soluble feed. So the plant doesn't have to wait or anything. Pretty much when you mix that into solution and pour it in that root zone, the roots can take up and absorb that right away. So I'm going to go over 3 blends that kind of makes the most sense for what plants are being grown in this space that you all are participating in. So we'll just start really with a general 20-20-20 all-purpose. You know, it's a general feed, all-purpose for all plants. It's really just going to provide that even tone growth that all plants will benefit from, whether it's a foliage plant or a flowering plant. Especially if you have indoor foliage plants, you know, 20-20 is not going to hurt anything. It's just a nice balanced formula that really pairs well with hard water sources. And we have a 10-30-20 blossom booster. This feed is really great for the indoor and outdoor flowering plants, marigolds, geraniums, impatiens, stuff like that. Again, it's a higher phosphorus feed, so I wouldn't recommend feeding it all the time. Kind of mixing it in or rotating it with a general purpose is a great fertilizer plan to have. But if you have a lot of geranium baskets or marigolds, some of those plants, you know, Blossom Booster really does a nice job in promoting that flower production. And then the last water soluble feed I want to touch on is our petunia feed. This is for low pH plants that really thrive. So pansy in your early spring, zinnia, lantana, petunia, calibrachoa. Again, like I talked about before, has that boosted micronutrient package with 3 sources of iron. And the low phosphorus in this promotes that compact growth, preventing that long, stretchy, leggy hanging baskets, you know, that don't always look great later in the summer. This product is going to prevent that. Then switching over to a time release, the benefits of what a time release can do in conjunction with water soluble. So for the most part, at least our products, you can feed them both together. So when you're putting those containers out, or if your containers are already out, you can sprinkle this classic coat product on them. And this is going to feed those plants for up to 4 months. Ideal for fruiting and flowering plants. Really, any finished plant is going to benefit from this. It's a slow release nutrient made from recycled resources. So it's a sustainable choice for a not so sustainable product. And what makes this like renewable is the phosphorus source that we use in this blend. The prill that we get is actually the phosphorus in that prill is harvested from reclaimed Chesapeake Bay water. So it's water before it goes into the Chesapeake Bay, goes through a process, and the phosphorus actually gets removed from that water and captured. And then it gets incorporated into some of the prills that we're using here. So pretty close to home, being that our headquarters is here in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Chesapeake Bay is not far from where we are. So, and again, this is another complete fertilizer product. Macronutrients, secondary macros, and we have a strong micronutrient package in as well. So what I like doing even is sprinkling this on the plants, and then when it's raining, like I said before, if it rains, at least your plants are still getting nutrients from this slow release product. And then if it dries out or you need the water later, you can apply a water soluble feed as well, and it's not going to hurt the prills. It's not going to cause them all to release at the same time or anything. We use a specific sulfur coating on our prills, so it's a little more eco-friendly as well. But that sulfur coating just really controls how much is released at one time. Extreme temperature is not going to cause everything to release at once, like some other products that are out on the market. So when you're in your early planning stages, you know, you're thinking of different combinations you're trying to put together, or you know, what makes sense in this basket versus this container. It's really important to know the plants that you're choosing and how they grow together or how they don't, because that can cause some real challenges in maintaining them. So if you look here, This is a really nice handout. I have a good technical bulletin I can share with all of you on this. But this is a nice guide to look at and just get a better understanding of the different ornamental plants that are on the market and how they should be grouped for the best uniform growth. So the low pH or the petunia group is listed here. The product that makes the most sense for that is our 2319 petunia feed. So when you're looking for different selections, or if you really want, a lot of petunias in a planter and geraniums, like it might be something to consider. Some different varieties that can still give you the form that you're looking for, but will be happier when mixed together. Compared to these more moderate pH or high pH groups of plants, this is where you're going to find that geranium, marigold, snapdragons, different plants like that benefit more from like a blossom booster or an all-purpose feed. So this is just a really nice list. It's a great tool to use as a reference. And like I said, we can share the technical bulletin on this too, just when you're going through and making your choices, what makes this the most sense. So like those high pH plants in that geranium group, they like a higher pH of like 6 to 6.4. That keeps iron less available for them. That's why they stay nice and green. Again, and that all-purpose and blossom booster is great. And usually magnesium is super important. So magnesium, or you could apply magnesium in the form of like an Epsom salt, or it could be in the fertilizer already, like these two listed here, which contain a sufficient amount of magnesium. But what magnesium supports is chlorophyll production, and that's what's going to keep those leaves nice and green. So just some tips for that plant group. And then tips for this low pH plant group. Again, it's that iron deficiency that you want to stay away from, and making sure that pH is in that low range of like a 5.5 to 6. Products like petunia feed have the iron those plants need, and they can be fixed. So an example of this is right here. These are hanging baskets. I was working with a grower, was with them this past February, and they have these combo containers that they grow out. So as you can see here, the center is a geranium, and then it's surrounded by a verbena and a petunia. And you can see in this picture, there's some struggle. So the geranium across the board is looking really nice and healthy. But you can see the new growth, which I have outlined in red. The new growth on a lot of these plants is looking a little chlorotic. And what's happening here is these plants have different needs. So from the slides we just looked at, your geranium is a high pH plant. That one's a pH of like 6.2 to 6.4. While these calibrachoa, petunia, and verbena, they need a lower pH of like 5.5 to 5.8. And it's tough to maintain that. And this grower I was with grows thousands of plants. And this is just the perfect example of the message I'm trying to get across when you're selecting different plants in combo containers, is understanding what those plants need and making sure you have a plan in place, because it can be managed for sure, but you just have to be a little proactive about it. And that's where fertilizer rotation really comes into play, and kind of mixing up that nutrient delivery to just provide the elements that all the plants need without focusing on one group or the other, or you're going to have this ununiform growth happening. So a lot of times what I would recommend then, more for finished plants, not so much in this specific situation where this picture was taken, but for what you all are growing and the space that you're in, that's where, applying a slow release is a really good like insurance thing, especially if you have a wet summer. At least you have a slow release on there that some nutrients are getting in there. But then rotating fertilizer, and that would be going from like a petunia feed to support those low pH plants. And then, and it wouldn't have to be every time you'd have to rotate, but it would be like, stick with a petunia feed all the time, and then do an all-purpose or blossom booster application once or twice a week. Kind of try and keep it as straightforward as you can, because that all-purpose is going to support that overall growth. And the petunia feed is going to have that boosted micronutrient package to really just bring that bulk program full circle. But this is one of my favorite slides because it really depicts what I'm trying to drive home here. And that is just that different plants have different nutrient needs, and you can see how things can look weird over time if they're not being managed properly. So some takeaways for the talk today is that plants need food just like you. How I explained earlier, how you eat a couple meals a day. We think it's really important that a fertilizer solution should be applied at a low rate all the time to prevent any kind of deficiency. Water is the most important aspect of growing plants, whether it's the water quality or it's the water consistency, and just making sure those baskets and containers are not going from extreme wetness to extreme dryness, because that stress can cause problems with plants as well. And just knowing the free nutrients that are in that water, so that way a fertilizer can be chosen appropriately to benefit the plants that are being grown. And just being mindful of plant species living in mixed containers, like I just finished talking about, and the nutrients needs. Rotating fertilizer, mixing up that nutrient delivery will really make that display pop in a way you probably haven't seen before if you're not already doing that. So it's pretty much all I have. Give your plants what they crave, feed them jacks, is what we like to say. If you have any questions right now, would be the time. It looks like we have some, so.
We do. Thank you, Kaitlyn. First, I'm glad that your email is on the screen, because someone has asked for a copy of the planting combination. So perhaps they can reach out to you directly, since your email is on the screen. They can reach out, and others, if you're looking for more information about this presentation and some of the information that Kaitlyn shared. We have a question from Ken. How accurate is the time release prill in hot weather? How do weekly temperature averages above 90 degrees affect the 4-month release time?
Yep, that's a great question, Ken, and I'm really glad you asked that. We get that a lot with our time release. And that's where I was kind of focusing on the coating that's on our prills. So our time release stands apart from other slow release products that are on the market, as it's not as temperature driven or temperature influenced as other products. Our prills will start to release at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So once your environmental temperature reaches around that 70-degree mark, the nutrients will slowly release. But the technology in our sulfur coated prills, so that's the key, is our prills are coated with a sulfur coating. That prevents the nutrients from releasing all at one time. So again, whether it's temperature, because I know, like I mentioned before, like other time release products that are on the market, if the temperatures hit 90, and that's exactly what you're talking about, Ken, when the temperature hits 90, it releases all at once, and that's when you can have burn. When our time release was formulated, that was like one of the forefront things that was really looked at in preventing, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want this huge boost in nutrients being released all at once and burning those plants. It's the coating that we put on those prills. It's the technology that we chose for that, to really make sure it's slowly available regardless of the temperature. So that's a good question. I hope that answers what you're looking for.
All right, well, that was the last question. There has been a comment just thanking Kaitlyn for your presentation. It was very informative, and I'm going to echo that. Thank you so much. It was outstanding. I learned a lot. I really appreciate you being with us today. We will have a recording of this webinar posted on the America in Bloom website later today, and it'll be posted on our AIB Facebook page. Also today, I sure hope you're following us on social media. Our next webinar is Tuesday, July 23rd at noon Eastern Time. It's called The Wonderful World of Plant Nutrition. We learned some of that today. We're going to learn even more in July. It will be presented by George Grant of Griffin Greenhouse Supplies. You can learn more about America in Bloom's webinars and our other programs by visiting the website at americainbloom.org. Thank you to everyone for joining us. A very special thank you to Kaitlyn Sterner for the great presentation. Have a great day, everyone.